Welcome to the Mind for Success podcast. I'm your host, Kimberly Lebbing, and I love seeing business professionals, leaders, and entrepreneurs have massive success in their businesses. Are you ready to reach a higher level in your business? Are you looking to rise to the top and break through the barriers that are holding you back? If this is you, join us on the Mind for Success podcast. Hello, and welcome to the Mind for Success podcast. I am your host, Kimberly Lebbing, and I'm excited to introduce my new friend, Michael Harris, to the show. Michael has he's multi-talented, but one of his specialties is he can help anyone move from fear of speaking in front of others to powerfully sharing their message with any size group or audience. He is an author, he's a coach, he's a yoga teacher. He is the co-founder of Endless Stages. He's written several books. His number one best-selling book is Falling Down, Getting Up. And I want him to share a little bit about that story. So I'm not going to give it away right now, but the other things that he's done is he's also co-authored 2 other books, Expert Success Solutions and Podmatch Guest Mastery. And that is how we met. So thank you so much for being on today, Michael.
It's really great to be here, Kimberly, and thank you for inviting me. And I want to tell you, I always like to listen to a lot of podcasts, and I listened to some of your podcasts, your last one, episode 31, opening words of opportunity. And I liked it because it talked about like fun ideas with money and Tyler Foley, which you had on in the past. And then I went back and also listened to episode 5 with Mike Swale, which was really great because he talked about mindset that really helps solve, problems and creates possibilities. And so for any listeners that are here now, I would encourage you to go back and listen to some of the other episodes because there's some really good discussions and information there.
Yeah, I will say I have met some of the most amazing people through this podcast, and I just can't say enough. So thank you for that little plug in. I appreciate it. So I would love, because when we talked before, we share a lot of the same interest as far as health and nature. And I wanted to ask that question about nature and this concept of quantum leaps. So how does nature teach us about quantum leaps?
Great question. One of the things about quantum leaps, it's really, a change of state from one state to another state, pretty much instantly or pretty darn quick. And over the years, one of the things I've noticed, and I live in the mountains of Central Oregon, one of the things that I notice about nature is it can change very quickly, whether it's on more the macro level and the weather. I mean, I've gone from, being 30 degrees Fahrenheit to 4 degrees Fahrenheit in the matter of a minute or two as a storm comes in. And then you start to notice, what are the animals doing? How are they acting? There's the great northern owl in Africa, and it's known as a transformer owl. It can sit there on the branch of a tree looking normal, or it can like squish itself down instantly, look like a branch, or it can make itself look bigger to scare off prey that are preying on it. So there's example after example, chameleons, sea cucumbers, octopuses. Octopuses can change colors instantly depending upon the environment around them. So as I started looking at this and started thinking about these ideas, I thought, well, what about humans? Can we change? Can we take quantum leaps as well? And I don't know, Kimberly, whether you've ever blushed, but we can have a change in our emotions and instantly our cheeks go red and we're blushing. That's a change of state. That's a kind of a micro example of a quantum leap. So then that leads, again, we can go a long ways down this rabbit hole.
Right, right.
And then that leads to the idea, and like even some of like what your other guests talk about, you know, in creating opportunities. What can we do to change our mind quickly to, you know, implement an idea, find new opportunities, think about something different? Because it's so easy to get stuck in our old ways. You know, our neural pathways are working a certain way, and we get stuck in them, and we do the same routine. You know, we have about 60,000 thoughts a day, and something like 90% of those are the same.
Right.
So we get stuck in this particular area. So how do we change? The first thing that we have to do is change the mind. Just simply change the mind. And if we change the mind, you know, the body will follow. I mean, we've talked before about health and pain and all of that. I've seen people change very quickly, you know, physically on the health level, just by changing their mind.
Absolutely. So we are so on the same page with that. So I love it. I'd love to hear a little bit about your health journey, because I know, well, the book that you wrote, and what your journey was with that, because it's really interesting. And, you know, I've had a similar journey. So I had a lot of health issues before I started working on mindset, and the mindset piece was so huge.
Yeah. And I will add in right here is, you know, I've done yoga for 35 plus years now. I've practiced for a long time, and I became a teacher as well. You know, the biggest lesson that I've ever learned in yoga is not about a certain position in a posture, or do triangle better, or even breathe better. The single biggest lesson that I've ever had was, don't worry about it, forget about it. Because I would worry about everything. I would hold on to things. I wouldn't forget about it. And that ended up coming to me 3 different times. But I want to go back a little bit. Well, first I'll mention what I did this year. This year, every week I climbed at least one butte to the top. A butte is like a small mountain or a large ridge or something. And most of what I do is off trail. So I don't like trails. Trails are for tourists, right? I like to create my own path, right?
I love it.
So the reason this is a big deal is because 36 years ago now, 1986, is I was about ready to have my legs cut off. And I had blocked arteries. My right leg was 100% blocked, left leg 65% blocked. And they told me that I had atherosclerosis, peripheral vascular disease. I was 27 years old, and I was dying of an old man's disease. So that they did what are called FEMPOPs, bypass. They restored the blood to each of my legs. A month later, I had a bunch of blood clots. A few months after that, my legs had already reblocked, and they wanted to do more surgery. And at that time, I left the hospital AMA. The surgeons were around my bed saying I had to have this surgery, AMA being against medical advice. And I walked out of that hospital, and to make kind of a longer story a little bit shorter, I ended up at a place called the Pritikin Longevity Center. And when I ended up there, I was walking about 10 feet with the cane, right? So I could barely walk. And the doctor, and I didn't recognize this at the time because the next time it came up was in yoga, but the doctor said, get up and walk. Don't worry about it. Just start walking. We're right on the boardwalk at Santa Monica, kind of between the Santa Monica Pier and Venice Beach, Marina Del Rey, that section of the beach down there. And he said, just get up and walk. Well, within 2 weeks, I went from walking 10 feet on a cane to walking 2 miles unassisted, just by getting up and walking. Wow. It changed my attitude. It built my self-esteem, my confidence, just the ability to do that. So today, again, I'll climb up any ridge or any butte as often as I can.
I love it. I love it. So, that leads in. So how do you relate these things to business?
Mm. One of the things that I've recognized, at least for myself, and I alluded to this a moment ago about, trails are for tourists. It's like create your own path. What is your individual path? And we really need to, and this is something that I've struggled with over the years as well from time to time, is what is my path, not what is somebody else's path. And am I attaching myself to that? Which there's reasons for that at times too, but what is the path for Michael Harris? Where is it that I can best be of service and best be helpful to others? So again, how far down this rabbit hole do you want to go, Kimberly?
It's okay. Well, I find it so it's interesting to me personally, because I know for me, there's been times in the past where I was following someone else's journey or trying to be like, name XYZ expert. And it doesn't work. You really have to do the inner work and find your own path. So it totally resonates.
Yeah. And let me go back again a little bit, because you asked me about my health. I mentioned about my legs. That was 36 years ago now, 1986. And in 1971, I had a water skiing accident, and they ended up taking out 60% of my liver, my gallbladder, 21 blood transfusions, collapsed lung, coma, 10-day coma, a near-death experience. I wasn't expected to live then either. And between that point and the point of having the surgery on my legs, I ended up jumping into drinking too much and addiction and really struggling with my self-esteem, didn't feel like I was worth it. So I was using the other substances as a way to not really think about those things, right? And it wasn't the right route. So, speed up to 30 years old, and I'm 64 now. So at one point at 30 years old, it was like, don't worry about it, forget about it, just let it go. And I let go of everything, and my life changed in a quantum leap, in an instant. I mean, I felt the energetic shift in my body. I mean, I still remember December 14th, 1988, laying in a hospital bed in Portland, Oregon. And it was just like, I can't live this way. I need to make the change. And I made the change like that. And it's been different ever since.
Wow. That's an amazing story, because I don't know. I think that sometimes because of the clients I work with, because I help them make that quantum leap, and sometimes people don't want to let go. They won't. And so that's such an integral part of it, is the decision to let it go.
And it took me years of that, because for a long time, I was really angry at God, because I didn't want to come back to the body when I was a kid. I wanted to stay where I was. I felt like God had done something wrong. And one of my grandmothers had died before that. And how could God have taken my grandmother? And so I had a lot of these resentments and anger towards God. But once I realized that if I remove that anger and resentment, maybe things will change. And that's what happened in December.
Yeah. I love it. Powerful story. Yeah. Thank you. So speaking of stories, you're obviously a very good storyteller, and I'm sure anybody listening is really leaning into all of this. I'd love to hear what your take is on why everyone's story is so important.
One of the things that I realized years ago was that when we were kids, we learned how to tell stories at a thing called show and tell. First, second grade, maybe even kindergarten. The teacher would say, Kimberly, tell us about your weekend, or Maybe it was even set up that bring something in that you want to share with the class. So we were starting to learn how to share stories as little kids. And it was really public speaking masquerading as show and tell, right?
Right.
So we all have the ability to share stories when we're willing to do that, when it's something that's exciting to us. That's what show and tell was. It was something exciting to us that were able to tell our friends. So one of the things that I've also tapped into is, especially right now in today's world, is there's a lot of energy bouncing around in our atmosphere right now, right? Of all the different things going on. And there's a lot of what I call knuckle butting. It's like this, that there's a lot of,
Yes.
power against power, and, it manifests itself in different ways. But one of the things, really, since the beginning of man, we've been sitting around campfires telling stories. It's, oh, honey, I killed this dinosaur for our food for the next month. You wouldn't believe how it happened. I had to do this. He almost killed me. He almost swiped me with his hand, all these things. We were telling stories, really, again, from the beginning of time. And then when people started getting together closer, and when they were resolving conflict, most of the time, almost the whole time, it was the result of verbal interaction, of discussion, telling stories, of saying how we're thinking and how we're feeling, and finding common ground. So like what you're doing with your show, you have all these great guests on. They come on, they tell their story. Some of the listeners will really resonate with one guest, some will resonate with another guest. But through that process, I believe that we become closer, and we become less inclined to do the knuckle butting, right?
Yes. Yes.
So the more that we can do this, the better. And there are places in the world where you can't do what we are doing today. We're free to speak about anything we want. Not everybody is. So if those of us like you and me are able to sit here and have these discussions, I think it presses against that power. And instead of knuckle butting so hard, maybe it starts to get less and less and less and less. And then it's more, clasping of hands rather than hitting the knuckles.
I love that because, gosh, especially the last couple of years, you're right about the different energies. And it does, as stories bring people together. It humanizes people and makes them more real, and it helps people have empathy. It's big.
Yeah, because we find that we really have much more in common than anything else. And it doesn't matter. I could start talking to somebody that grew up in Kenya that I would not seem to have anything in common, but as we start talking, we would find things in common.
Yes.
It doesn't matter what,
Yes.
take any two people from anywhere.
Yeah, there's always something. So
Always
yes.
something.
Yeah, I agree totally. So let's shift a little bit about how you help people with speaking and overcoming some of those things. So let's talk about that a little bit.
One of the things that I see with all of us, again, coming back to show and tell,
Yes.
is we all have what we need with us already inside of us. And it's just really learning how to use it. So if we can take those skills that we learn in show and tell to be able to tell stories, to be able to get on stage, to be able to get on virtual summits, to talk to friends at a restaurant while we're having dinner, whatever it might be, as we start to exercise those talents that we have, those muscles get stronger and stronger. And then we're able to get on stage and say anything we want. I'll give a brief example. There was a forensic psychiatrist that I know. I met him about, maybe 2004, somewhere in there. He was a forensic psychiatrist with the federal prison system, working with primarily high-profile type prisoners.
Mhm.
And the way that I met him is I was doing a yoga workshop in Durham, North Carolina, and he came and he was the guy, the quiet guy in the back of the room. Well, a couple years later, I was doing a training and I didn't know he was doing the training. There was about 350 people in the training, and he came to the training and it was just like, Ralph, what are you doing here? And he said, well, I got attacked in the prison and doing some of his work. And he says, the federal prison system is paying for me to become a yoga teacher. I went,
Wow.
wow. So why is this important is because as Ralph tried to start teaching, he couldn't teach. He couldn't get in the front of the room and talk.
Oh.
So we went back and again, we broke down what his experience was. Well, Ralph, tell me about working in the prison. Did you ever talk to a group of inmates in a room? Yes. Would you ever manage therapeutic type groups? Yes, I did that. Did you ever have to speak to, other prison executives and officials about, the processes that you were doing? He says, yes. And I said, well, what if you take that same thing you're already doing and apply it over here?
Mm.
And it's just like, it was a light bulb that went off in his head. And literally, again, he took a quantum leap. Instantly, he went from not being able to talk and hiding in the back of the room to being the person in the front of the room, the most liked, the most loved person, because he realized he already had the skills and ability to do what he wanted to do.
He just needed to be shown.
That's right.
Yes, I love it. I love it. I love it. So, what are some foundations you mentioned? So, in your when we spoke before, 3 foundations that people can use to get their message out.
Well, one of the things that they first need to do is to know what their message is.
Mm.
What
That-
is?
Absolutely. That goes
that's-
back to what we talked about earlier, I think.
Absolutely. Is it a message about wealth? Is it a message about business? Is it a message about relationships? And it really needs to be something, I believe, that is just part of us. If they're struggling too much with it, it may not be their message,
Mm.
right? So finding that message is really important. Then there's a couple of different exercises that I will walk people through is once they know what their message is, and they may not even know their message quite yet, is I help them break down their life over 5-year periods and take ideas out of each 5-year period that may relate to what it is that they want to talk about, their message that they want to talk about. So it may have been, being a 4.0 student in high school, let's say. So how can they take that and their passion for education and use that as an example in delivering their message to, say, a group of educators,
Mm.
right? So drawing back on those different experiences. And again, there's endless type of experiences we can talk about, but that would be one example. So finding out what it is, and then writing some bullet points. I'm a big proponent of bullet points for our discussions. Yeah, we can write out a full talk. I don't like doing it. I don't like writing out a full speech or a talk that I'm going to do, but I want to highlight bullet points. So what are 3 ideas? What are 5 ideas? I wouldn't go very many because you get to too many ideas and it's hard for the listener to really take it in. So 3 is a very good number. So what is it? How are you going to say it? And how are you going to really deliver that message?
Mm.
What order are you going to say it in? How is this message going to have impact? Do you need to create a call to action of some sort at the end? Do you want the listener to do something? It may be buying a product that you have, it may be connecting with another person, but some type of call to action. Again, we can take 3 different ideas, like what we just talked about, put those aside and say, okay, what are other 3 ways to do it? Because there's lots of 3
Right.
ways to do it, right?
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
it's finding what works really for the individual that helps them connect with their audience.
Yeah, I'm
Like,
glad you
yeah,
mentioned bullet points because I think that's huge. In the beginning, I used to write out everything,
yeah.
and you could never remember it for one. I mean, unless you're really good at memorizing.
Yeah, yeah. And there's a place for it. I mean, like going back to Tyler Foley, you interviewed him episode
Mhm.
26. He's a lifelong actor. So I mean,
Yes.
you have scripts, you have to deliver scripts, but he's also a master at helping people on stage as well and getting their stories delivered. So if somebody's listening to this now, again, go back to episode 26 and listen to Tyler.
Yes, that excellent point
Yeah,
because they are both valuable. I think that if you're not a person that can memorize things, if you're not a script person, then the bullet point thing is going to be more valuable for
yeah.
you.
And then the more we know about a subject, the easier it is to deliver. I will add
Absolutely.
one thing. In most cases, and this is an interesting exercise I did years ago with one of my publishers. We did an exercise for 2 hours. And I thought, 2 hours, how are we going to do this? The exercise was explain to a 5-year-old how to tie their shoes.
Oh, wow. For
And the
2 hours.
for 2 hours. And the purpose of it was to help us explain the simplest ideas.
Mm,
Because we tend to, and I do this too, take a subject and try to overcomplicate it. You know,
right.
what are a couple of simple ideas around your idea? What can you do to say it in a way that somebody will understand?
Mm, right. Right. Yeah, that's really powerful. So thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. So tell us a little bit more about your book. Um,
Which one?
actually, the more recent ones that you just wrote that you co-authored.
Uh, the Pod Match book.
The Pod Match book.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
then there was Expert Success Solutions. And then the first one was this one, the Falling Down, Getting Up book.
awesome,
And then
awesome.
I'm not going to mention the title, but there's another one coming this spring.
Oh, okay, okay, something to come. I love it. I love it. Okay, so where would you like for people to go or learn more about you and your work?
The simplest place is just my website, which is michaelbharris.com.
Okay.
If they want a free copy of this book,
Falling down, getting up.
Falling Down, Getting Up, they can go to michaelbharris.com/book.
Okay.
You won't see the link on my website. It's a backlink. But if
Okay.
somebody wants a free copy, they can get it there, or they can go to Amazon or any bookseller and they can get any of these books on Amazon.
Okay. Well, I'll make sure we have that link specifically in the show notes so people can click and download that if
Awesome.
that's what they want to do. So
Yeah.
it was such a pleasure having you on today. So I love you've got a very gentle spirit about you, and it shows. I think all the yoga. um, so I really appreciate you being on today, and I know our listeners are going to get a lot of value out of this.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you for being here, or thank you for inviting me again. And it's great to be here.
Thank you.
Are you ready to break through the barriers that are holding you back and reach a higher level in your business in just 4 hours? Be sure to click the link today and join other high-achieving professionals that have worked with Kimberly Lebbing to accelerate their success.